Mm. Okay, so Grandma, for the video, just say your name, where you were born, when you were born, and where you currently live.
My name is Kathleen Starling Reid. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and I presently live in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your early childhood up through like your teenage years. So, like, what was your household like? Who all lived there? Just kind of go into all of that.
I was the oldest of my mother's and father's three girls, and we all lived in a blended family with my aunt and her three children and my grandmother. And we lived on Austin. We all went to elementary school together. Um, Being the oldest, a lot was expected of me.
Mm-hmm.
I always had to complete tasks, do what my mother asked me to do, and I never disagreed or argued with her at all. I was active in school. I was very quiet, very shy, kind of timid as I was growing up because I was real sickly. I had asthma a lot, and so my mother was very guarding of me. She wouldn't allow me to go out too much in the cold because I would always get sick. So I enjoyed being around my family because I didn't have an opportunity to go out and play a lot with some of the other children.
Mm-hmm. So, what were some of the responsibilities that you had as the oldest?
As the oldest, I had the responsibility of looking out for my younger sisters, Lorraine and Nisi, make sure that they got along because they clashed a lot when we were little.
How so?
Uh, they had both of them had strong personalities, and both of them were always right. And by Nisi being the baby, she was always getting all of the attention, and Lorraine was the middle child, and she didn't quite like Nisi get all the attention. So they would just argue and fight over toys and issues, and I would have to be the peacemaker.
What was one of maybe like the more memorable arguments they had growing up?
Um, Going, let's see, I think we wanted to go to the movies on. If we went to church on Sundays, we could go to the movies, and we wanted to go to the movies, and we argued over what movie we wanted to see. I can't remember what the movies were, but I ended up making the decision where
Mm-hmm.
we would go because the two of them just couldn't gel, they couldn't blend, they couldn't mix. And so we ended up going to the movie that I selected. And most of the time, in settling their arguments, we did what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you did what Lorraine wanted, then Nisi was mad. And if you did what Nisi wanted, Lorraine got mad. So if you did what I wanted, they said, "Oh, all right, we'll do what you want to do." So that's how it all. That's how we went, and we were close. Nisi was the youngest. Lorraine and I were closer,
Mm-hmm.
but Nisi was the youngest, and she was like 10 years younger.
Oh. It was a gap.
So there
That
was a tremendous
yeah.
gap there. And Lorraine and I were closer. We were like 2 years apart. And there's about 10 years apart with Nisi. So we didn't have the same kind of standards, and we didn't do the same kinds of things because when Nisi came along, my mother's standards were very laissez-faire. When we were coming, she was very strict, very structured with us. But by the time Nisi came, she was like, yeah, let her do this.
What was like some things that she was really strict about that you feel like she was more relaxed with Auntie Nisi?
Well, when we were older, we got to be teenagers. We couldn't really date,
Mm-hmm.
and if we went out, we had to be in by 11 o'clock. And I always had a girlfriend. Her name was Judy. That was my best friend. And if she couldn't go wherever the party was, or the game, or the activity, then my mother wouldn't let me go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have to be in it. We'd have to be in early. But now my middle sister Lorraine's attitude was my mother gave us a curfew. We always had a curfew, and the curfew could have been 12 o'clock. Well, Lorraine was out having a good time, and when she looked up, it was 1 o'clock, and she would say, "Oh well, I'm gonna be on punishment anyway," so she just hang out as long as she wanted to. Nisi was the same way. She would go out and she had a curfew. She'd never make the curfew.
Mm.
And sometimes she wouldn't even get a curfew.
Really?
Yes. We had, she could come in and come and go as she pleased. We never had that option to come and go as we pleased. But it was a totally different persona with Nisi. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe like your mom and your dad's personalities?
My mother
Like
was a
give the
my mother
backstory
was a
for both of
strong
them.
personality. My dad was quiet, kind of calm. No, I never saw him really get upset. My mother was very dominant, and she made the rules, and everybody followed the rules. Um, she she loved her family, and she was determined that we had the best that she could afford for us. She tried to make sure that we were active in school, in activities. We went to church every Sunday. We were active at the church level. Um, I think I was in a social group where they had a cotillion,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in the cotillion, and that was the first time anybody in our immediate family had been in any social event like that.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody was all excited, and I was excited because I was the first to do this for our family. But she was very strong and determined that her children would get a college education, make sure that we were on task in school and we did our homework. And we did not bring bad grades in, because if you brought bad grades in, that meant you were in the house to the next grading period.
Oh no.
So we were focused. We were focused.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Tell me a little bit more about her, like where she was born, kind of what you know about her childhood and coming up, all of
She
that.
was born in Birmingham, Alabama. She was, I think, my grandmother's oldest child. My grandmother had three girls. I think the middle girl died at, at, at birth, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And they came to Cleveland when she was about 10 or 11, I think. And my dear got a job up here. And so they went to school up in Cleveland. They lived in the projects off of, yeah, in the projects. I remember that. And she graduated from high school. She went to work at a factory. Um, and my dad worked at Republic Steel.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just ordinary people. And I used to hear people talk about being poor. I never realized I was poor because we always had a food, we had a home, we all lived in the same house, and my grandmother and my mother and my aunt took turns cooking for everybody. We always had clothes. So I never felt like I was poor
Mm-hmm.
until I became an adult, and people start talking about the income of families that are in the poverty level. And my parents were just factory workers, so they didn't make a lot of money, and I didn't realize that they were poor. But we
Mm-hmm.
survived it, and it
Yeah.
made us strong, made us determined.
Mm-hmm. What about some of your favorite memories with like your parents?
One of the things that we used to do on Sunday, we get in my dad's car, we get in the car, and we drive around. We would come up into this area called Forest Hills.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful area. The houses were so pretty, and the grass is green, and it was just beautiful. And we just like to come up and drive around in this area and look at the pretty houses. And I used to say, one day I'm going to own a house up in this area. And then after we drive around, we'd go to Franklin's, which was on 105, to the ice cream place,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd all get ice cream, and then we'd come back home. Or either some Sundays we would um, go to the movies as a family after we came home from church. Um, we enjoyed traveling. We would, I think, with my grandmother. I must have been about my dad's mom. I must have been about 8 or 9,
Mm-hmm.
and I traveled with her to Birmingham, Alabama. I think that was the first time I'd ever been south,
Mm-hmm.
and that was quite an experience I will never forget.
Talk a little bit about what happened there.
Well, we went on the bus, and on the bus we had our shoebox full of chicken and light bread and chips and stuff so that we could eat. Because in most places we couldn't go into the restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
so we had our food, and we drove down there. So when we got down there, we stayed with Big Papa. That was her dad's name.
That was your mom's dad's name,
That was
or
my
was your
dad's my
dad's?
my my paternal grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And her father, she called him Big Daddy. So we got to Big Daddy's house, and so we were going to go to the movies. So when we got to the movie, I'm thinking we're going into the front part of the movie like everybody else. I saw all these other people going.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother said, "No, we color people can't go there." I said, "What?" So she said, "We have to go to the back." So we went around like in an alley and up the back, up some back stairs. And we went to the movie, and we were sitting up in the balcony. That's where all the black people were, in the balcony.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really strange to me because I couldn't understand why I couldn't go down there on the front, be down on the main floor, because that's where I wanted to go. But my grandmother says, "No, we don't go down there." So I said, "Okay." So then I had to go to the bathroom. And so she said, "Well, the bathroom's right straight across." So I, as a little 8 or 9 year old, was walking to the bathroom, and then I saw these steps and all these people. And so I thought, maybe I'll go down there to the bathroom. And as I was going down the steps, at the bottom of the steps, there was this big usher, big, strong white man. He said, "Where you going, little black girl?" And my grandmother must have missed me. And she came flying down those steps to grab me and take me up. So, oh, she didn't know where she was going. And I kept thinking, yes, I did. I was going down there because I saw a bathroom down there that I liked. My grandmother was so upset with me. She says, "You don't do that here." And that was my first experience with racism. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't go to the movies where I wanted to go, and I couldn't go to the bathroom where I wanted to go. And that's where I was very upset.
Yeah. What else? What else do you remember from that trip down there?
Um,
Like what was the house like that you
it was
stayed
it
in?
was a small house, and I'm trying to think if it was with Big Daddy or somebody else, that we had a slop jar. That was the first time
A
I'd ever
slop
heard of
jar?
a slop jar, and they didn't have inside bathrooms, so you use a slop jar, those experiences I will always remember.
How
I
long was
never
the
knew what
trip?
we were there about a week. I was
Mm.
ready to go home for real. We were there about a week, and I remember using that slop jar, and you have to get up in the morning, and somebody has to take it out to the outhouse and clean it out and all that crazy stuff.
Ew.
But those were my childhood experiences that I will always remember.
How often did you go down there to
Well,
visit?
we didn't go very often. I think maybe once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
I think I went down there because then he died, so we didn't go back. And then when I got married and went to Chattanooga, I had another experience with racism.
Mm-hmm.
My brother-in-law and I were going to go. I think we were going skating. We were going to go skating, roller skating. So he took me to this roller rink, and we got ready to go in. And the man said, "We don't serve your kind."
Oh.
And I'm thinking, what does that mean? You don't serve my kind? Wendell says, "We can't go here. They don't allow black people in this place." And I'm thinking, at that time, I was in my 20s. I said, "Does that still happen?" And then Wendell says, "Yes, it does." So we left and went. But I'm thinking, that was strange.
Yeah. So up here in Ohio, you didn't really have any run-ins with anything like that, or if
No,
you did, was it more like passive stuff, like comments or
it was
anything
more
like that?
passive. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't as poignant as it was when I went there. And I came to the conclusion that up north, there was the racism, but it was a little undercover. They were really uh, subtle with it. But
Mm-hmm.
down south, there was no subtlety. You knew exactly what they wanted to say, and you knew exactly what they wanted to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Do you do you remember any examples of how it was up here? Any little comments or something that stuck out to you that you remember?
No, I can't remember anything because up here, my mother was very, she sheltered me a lot.
Mhm.
And so I didn't go that many places. And I would go to the movies, and I could always go in the front door.
Mhm.
And we went to the restaurant every blue moon. We would go to a restaurant, which was not very often. And then you go into the restaurants, and they would serve you. So I really didn't have any experiences as I was growing up
Mhm.
with racism.
It was always when you were somewhere else.
It was always when I was someplace else. Yeah.
Mhm. So what? I know you like to go to the movies and that sort of thing when you were younger, but what were some other things or like places you or like you and your sisters or your friends like to go like for fun growing up around there?
There was a skating rink. I can't think of the name of it. We would go skating on Saturdays. Be a lot of us, and then we would go walking. We did a lot of walking in the park. There's a cultural gardens up here going out up not very far from where my grandmother lived. We would go walking in the cultural gardens. We would go to the museum. We would walk. And every place we went, we walked.
Mhm.
Um, we every now and then we would take a bus, but most places we went as a group, we would walk. Um, I would go to the playground, and there was a swimming pool down at the end of the street where I lived. And my friends, I couldn't swim because my mother said that she was not straightening my hair every day. So I couldn't go, so I never learned how to swim. But I wanted to make sure that my children learned how to swim.
Mhm.
But I would go till you could sit on the sidelines and watch them. And so that's what I'd do. I'd go while they would be swimming, I'd watch them and we just laugh and talk and have fun. And then when I got to high school, I joined the choir. I was sang with the choir and uh, some other organizations I was in. I took Latin. That was the worst class in the world, Latin.
Latin.
Oh God, it was so difficult, and my girlfriend and I struggled, but we made it through. I said, and I asked myself, why did you take Latin? I'll never understand. But that was but we made it through, and we tried to join the Latin club, but that was the worst thing in the world because we still didn't know what they were talking about. Um, I went to the games. I love to go. We like to go to the games, the basketball games. Um, our team, we had a good team now, the years that we were in high school. Glenville had a real good team.
Mhm.
Um, Again, my mother was very cautious
Yeah.
about allowing me to go out with places because now if I went to the game, I had to come home. I couldn't go to the game and go to a party and come home. She wasn't too cool on house parties.
Mhm.
So I went to very few of those, if any. Um, I enjoyed reading and playing school. I used to play the teacher with my dolls up on the third floor. I always wanted to be a teacher. I always wanted to be able to work with those kids. There are those children who have it and who can move on and be successful, but then you have those kids who struggle. And I don't know, I had an affinity for those children. I wanted to make sure that if they struggled, they were going to struggle with and come out successful. And all my teaching experience, I focused on the children who were challenged.
Mhm.
And I tried to make sure that even though you're challenged, it does not mean that you cannot be successful and be the kind of person you want to be and do what you want to do.
Mhm.
Um, Anything else?
Yeah. So, so what was your very first job that you ever had?
The very first job that I ever had was in a factory off 105. What was he? I think it was off 30th and Superior.
Mhm.
And I don't even know how I got the job, but anyway, I was there. I think it was in high school when I graduated from high school. I think I got the job to make some money because I was going to college that fall, and it was in a factory, and we were doing. Uh, paper, the towels that you use to wipe on your cars when you go to the service station. We were bagging up those paper towels, and we pulled them off rolls and folded them up.
Mhm.
It was it was like a big old hot barn, and it was just dull and it was terrible. And I think you got like two 10-minute breaks a day
Really?
and 30 minutes for lunch. And it was so hot in that place. And I think that was the experience that let me know, because there were some women who had been in that job for 20 years, 15 years. And I said to myself, I will never work in a place like this for 15 to 20 years. So
Mhm.
that job motivated me to make sure that I was going to go to college and finish.
How old were you when you
I
started
was
that job?
18. I
Mm.
was 18. And so I was determined that I was not going to stay in that kind of environment. And the pay was not that good. The environment was not that good. And I'm thinking, if you're going to work, you want to work in an environment where you enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
So that really motivated me to stick to my guns and go to college.
Mhm. So, how old were you when your parents divorced or split up?
Um, I was, I think I was 18 or 19, because I think I was in college.
Mhm.
No, I was in college when mother got married. I was 15 or 16
Mhm. And what was
when they
that like? That
divorced.
when all that was happening, do you remember how you were feeling or how your
Yes, it
sisters were
was. It was
feeling?
like, oh, they argued all of the time. They would fuss, and I was real nervous, because if my dad would go out and come in, he'd come in fussing and yelling and screaming, and I would be jumping because I was afraid he was going to hurt my mother.
Mhm. Was
And
that a thing that like, or were you just scared he was gonna do
I
that?
was just scared he was going to do that. So I was always they always fussed and they argued, and so I just hated for him to come home sometime, because I knew what was going to happen.
Mhm.
And so when they got a divorce, I felt relieved for my mother,
Mhm.
and um, I was hoping. I said, well, she has to raise the two girls, the three girls, and I said, well, she can do this. I was concerned about financially how she was going to manage,
Mhm.
but we lived in a blended family, so we were still in the same house with my grandmother and my aunt, so that was helpful.
Yeah. It
Um,
wasn't all on
it
her.
wasn't all on her, and she
Yeah.
wasn't in the house by herself. So um, we managed to get along, and like most times you couldn't. My dad wasn't don't giving money like he should,
Mhm.
and so she had to take him to court, and she would have to take off work sometime, and she can't afford to take off work, because you pay, you get hourly
Mhm.
salary. So there was a lot of friction and craziness going on during that time. But we got through it, and she
Mhm.
was strong. She was really strong, and she made sure that her three girls didn't suffer.
Mhm.
We had clothes, we ate, and we had a place to shelter. And if we needed to go somewhere special, she and my grandmother would always manage to get the money for us to go.
Mhm.
I remember when I went to college and I pledged the sorority, I said, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to pledge, because I don't know if I can get that money. So I was talking to my mother about it. She says, you go ahead and do what you want to do. We'll have the money for you. And she did. They
Mhm.
had the money. I don't know how she and my dad got it together, but they did.
How
And I
much
was
was
able to
it? Do you
pledge.
remember?
It was about $300 or $400 then.
Mhm. What
Yeah.
year was that?
When did I go? 65.
Mm.
1965, what I pledged. And I was excited to be in a sorority. And again, I was the first one in the immediate family to go to
So
college.
you were a first generation
Yeah, I was
college student.
yeah. So I was excited, and to be in a sorority too. Oh, I was happy.
Mhm. So do you feel like you took your perspective of like the divorce and mother being able to manage and all of that? Do you feel like you handled that better than your sisters, or do you feel like they also felt kind of similar to you?
Uh, I'm thinking they probably Nisi was kind of young, so I'm not sure how she felt. Nisi
Mhm.
was, but I'm thinking that Lorraine and I kind of were on the same page.
Mhm.
Um, we saw our mother struggling, but she managed to keep afloat.
Mhm. So, when did she get with Papa? When did she
She
meet him
met.
and all of that?
Um, they met. I don't know. I don't remember how they met. She was in a social club, and I think they met him in a social club,
Mhm.
and he was a policeman, and I think they were dating for a couple of years. So that made it would have maybe. I think they got married when I was a junior
Mhm.
in college. Yeah, I came home for Thanksgiving, and they got married during that Thanksgiving time.
How long were they kind of dating or whatever? Was
I
it?
think they may have been dating, as far as I know, maybe a couple of years. Could have
Mhm.
been longer than that, but a couple of years. And then when they got married, I saw a spark, some new energy,
Mhm.
some new life in my mom. She Spears was a member of I think it was called the Iowa organization, and they was a social group, and they had uh, parties and cabarets, and she was going to the parties and the cabarets and buying
Mhm.
new clothes, and just a new mother.
Yeah.
Uh, and because now she had some support, she didn't have to handle it all by herself, and that was great.
Mhm.
And then she bought a house, and then we left our blended family on Durant, and they bought a house in Shaker. She is Spears, and that's where they lived, in Shaker.
Mhm. So, what was? Do you remember when you first met him? How'd that go?
When I first met Spears, I said, "Oh, okay."
You weren't
I,
impressed.
no, he was a police officer, and he was okay. Because I had not seen him before,
Mhm.
and so I was just like, okay, I have to see what he's about. And
Mhm.
so I had to wait around and see, and the more times we were together, the more I really realized he was a genuine person, that he really loved my mother, and that it was going to be okay.
Mhm.
And he loved her children. He loved his girl. He loved her girls, and he had a son.
Was he
And
his son kind of around, or was he older than you? Or
George Jr., no, I think George Jr. was younger than I am.
mhm.
He wasn't around a lot. He would come over. He would come around every now and then. Um, but Spears was really good to us. If there's anything we needed, he would help us with it. He even co-signed a couple of times for some of us to get houses and cars and things like that. So he loved mother's children. He was real good to us.
Mhm. Compare your relationship with your dad to your relationship with Spears. What are some like the
Um,
differences or?
my my relationship with my dad was, I knew my dad loved me,
Mhm.
but he had difficulty showing it. Um, Spears showed us his love. He would he would take us places, do things with us.
Mhm.
Um, I know that if there was something, an activity or something at school, my dad would never he wouldn't come up. My mother was always there, but Spears' mother would come if there was something that was going on. Um, I always I think that as my dad got older, I think he began to realize that he could have done better,
Mhm.
and he tried to do better as he got older.
What
Yeah.
were some ways you you think you saw him trying to do better?
We had more opportunities to just talk. Before he was never around to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he would come over here and we would talk, and he even put me on his bank account. I thought, oh, okay. And he would just tell me the things that he wanted to do, and he loved his grandkids. Now he never did a lot for the grandkids either,
Mm-hmm.
but that was my dad. But we did for him. I always thought about him on his birthday. We always called him and gave him a gift. Took him for Christmas, even though he didn't always reciprocate.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't care. He was my father, and I gave him that respect.
Mm-hmm. So, what year was it when you went to college?
September 1963.
Mm-hmm. And how did you decide to go to Wilberforce? Like, were there other schools on your list, or was that
Well,
like?
there were other schools on my list, but my grandmother knew a pastor, an AME pastor. What was his name? I think his name was Reverend Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the pastor at Spelman AME Church in Kent, Ohio. And she knew him, and he said he could get me a scholarship to go to Wilberforce, and I wouldn't have to pay. I could get a works grant. Well, that was all my grandmother had to hear. And she said he can get you a scholarship. So I said, oh, okay. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how I ended up at Wilberforce.
What were some of the other schools that you were looking at?
Um, I didn't look at any other.
Well, you said you had some more on your list,
Okay,
like
I was,
possibilities.
yeah, I was going to go to OU
Mm-hmm.
or Bowling Green.
Mm-hmm. And for all of the schools, you wanted to go for education.
Education was my major.
Mm-hmm. And so when you got there, like, how was it being a freshman? Like, were you excited? Were you nervous?
Well, this was the first time that I have ever been away from my family.
Mm-hmm.
So here I was in this strange place, way in the middle of nowhere, with all these strange people I did not know. But I was excited because I was going to college.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mother said, well, if you don't like it, just go for a year and then we'll see what else we can do. And I thought, well, okay, because when you're at home, you're used to certain things. And
Yeah.
when you get to campus, you don't have those things. So I'm thinking, and then we had to share the bathroom and the showers with other, that was really strange. And so I got there in September and I thought, I'm just going to be here for a year. I ain't going to stay long. And then I start meeting people from across the United States of America. I met, I had friends from California, New York, Texas, and they were the best people in the world. And we were good friends. And by December, I was deciding, oh, I'm not going to. I'm going to stay right here. I enjoyed the faculty. They were very supportive of the students. Everybody knew everybody. Um, and if one of us was having trouble, everybody was supportive and tried to help that person. And I like that familyness
Mm-hmm.
that I saw at Wilberforce. And so I stayed there and I graduated on time, joined the sorority, sang in the choir. The choir traveled. We traveled to New York several times. We went to Connecticut. I think we traveled to Texas, Delaware. So I got an opportunity to go to various states to sing with the Wilberforce Choir.
Mm-hmm. So, what made you kind of get interested in joining a sorority? Cause like
Singing.
in the sorority, because like you said, you were like a first generation, so it's not like you had people close to you in your family that were in it, so that's how you knew about it. Like, what made you want to join?
Well, when I got on campus, you had women who were members of the various. I think there was the AKAs and the Zetas. I think were on the campus,
Mm-hmm.
and Delta Sigma Theta. And I just liked the women of Delta Sigma Theta. I I felt they were a little more genuine for me, and that their ministry or their mission was close to what I wanted to be. And so after we had the rush party and all of those things, I just decided to go with I didn't know what a sorority was before I got there.
What was the rush party like?
Oh, well, there was food, and they tell you about the organization and their purpose, and talk about the founders and what their vision is and what they know, usually do, and how they support community
Mm-hmm.
activities. And so we ate and had fun, and then we had to make some decisions.
Mm-hmm. So, how many girls were online with you?
There were 5 of
Mm-hmm. And what was your
us.
relationship like?
We had a good relationship. um, we we had to learn that we had to protect each other,
Mm-hmm.
and we had one of our sisters was dating, and we are supposed to be meeting and working on projects,
Mm-hmm.
and Claudia was dating. So we had to ring her back in and say, "You can't date right now, girlfriend, because you got to be with us, because some of these big sisters may come in here and you're not here, and we're going to be in trouble too." So that was fun. uh, and sometimes having alibis for Claudia.
Mm-hmm.
But we enjoyed each other. I think on my line, two have died.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 of us, and one of them is here. I think Roslyn is in California. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any who were kind of like your closest friends during your
in
time
college.
there?
My closest friend was Maria. Um, and Maria, she was one of my line sisters. And she was from Barbados, and
Mm-hmm.
she just died this year. And Connie, Priscilla Green, she was in my wedding. Priscilla was a lawyer, an attorney in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then there was Wesley, he was my friend. And um, let's see, Maria, Octavia. There was just a group of us that just hung around together.
Mm-hmm. So, Wilberforce, like you said, is in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you guys do for fun or like anything? What did you do outside of like class and like sorority things for fun?
Well, I didn't do too much because I was scared, because I could hear my mother's voice in my ear. But some of the kids would leave. They had cars and they would go to town to some of the activities in town. We had a bus called Homer, and if you wanted to go in town during the day, which is I would ride, you'd ride the bus to town and go do your shopping. We go to the movies in town. We
Mm-hmm.
also had movies at Central State on Sundays or Saturday, Wednesdays, and we would go to the movies. And then there was a little restaurant right across from campus called Ma Beatty's. Ma Beatty's would have the best bologna sandwiches that you've ever had in your whole life, or the best cheeseburger that you ever had. I don't know what she did to them, but those were the best sandwiches. And so most of us would gather over Mom Beatty's house, Mom Beatty's restaurant, and hang around there, or we would sit out on the stump and talk and walk around the campus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then every now and then, some organization will be having a dance. We go to their dances either on Central State side or on Wilberforce side.
Mm-hmm.
Or we go to the student union and play cards. I learned how to play whist, and that was what everybody did: go to play whist on during the week when didn't have any classes. So we entertained ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We entertained ourselves.
What about how did breaks look for you in college? So, when you would come back, would you come back here for like Christmas break,
Oh
Thanksgiving,
yeah,
Easter, all that stuff?
I'd come home for Christmas break, and I'd go to church, and and that was basically it. I'd see my friends from high school. We'd go out together, maybe go to the movies or something, and share ideas and experiences. And then it'd be time to go back to school.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I always came home, and in the summer, I had a summer work job. I worked at Cleveland Psychiatric Institute on the west side as an attendant every summer.
Mhm.
And
Do you remember how much you made?
no, I don't. I really don't remember how much I make, but I know that money was for to buy clothes
Mhm.
in the summer, but it wasn't a lot. But the experience that I had was just interesting because each summer I was on a different floor, so I experienced different um, kinds of patients. And there was one experience that the attendant there were patients who were prescribed to have shock treatments,
Mhm.
and I would take them to that room. I'd take them down on the elevator to the area where they were going to have their treatments, and I would watch them take them in the room, and they'd strap them up and do whatever they did. And then about 30, 45 minutes later, I'd come back and pick them up. And they would be like all in ozone. They would be so groggy, and it was just pitiful the way they would look. But
Mhm.
by the time we got up to the room, about an hour or two later, they were like back to normal. And it was interesting to see how behaviors changed in some of these patients because of those shock treatments. So I guess they worked. But it was just sad to me to see how it initially affects them once they get the shock treatment.
Mhm. A lot of people now that psychology has evolved, like they really talk about how those shock treatments were really sort of inhumane because it's not like
Yes.
they would put them to sleep.
No, they didn't
Like
put them to
they'd be a
sleep.
lot
Mm-mm.
like fully
Right.
cognizant.
So that experience I will always remember. Yeah.
Mm. So just a thought. So I've been doing some of my own research, just for my projects and everything, and I found out about some of the places people will go here to have fun. And I know you said you didn't really go out that much, but I was wondering if you knew anything about like if you had friends or if family members or whatever went to places like Gleason's or like Leo's Casino or
Mm-hmm.
any of those places.
Oh yeah, my mother would go there all the time.
Really?
Leo's Casino, I remember that. And Gleason, they did go. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you know anything about like those places at all that you could talk about?
No, not really. Other than they just, I think it was like a cabaret atmosphere. They drank and had entertainment, and I've seen pictures of her at Cleo's where they were just drinking and having fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What was what was kind of their? I know they were a part of like social clubs that would go out and do that stuff. What was that like? Like their social clubs and.
Well, their social club, they would get all dressed up in formal attire. They'd have big these fabulous formal dances, and they would dress all up, and everybody would go and they'd have entertainment, and they'd have a meal, a really fancy meal, and they would just share and talk and then raise funds for charitable activities,
Mhm.
and then come back and talk about what they did for a whole year and what they were going to do next year. And did you see what so and so had on this year? That was sharp, wasn't it?
Mhm. Did that ever make you wanna like join those, or did you kind of you didn't really
No,
have a
that's
big
I
interest
know.
in
I
them?
said no. That I didn't want to join anything my mother was in. I just didn't want to do that.
Nothing. So when you were getting ready to graduate from college, what were some of like I know you wanted to be an educator, but what were some other kind of plans or things you had when you were getting ready to graduate?
When I was getting ready to graduate, I was really concerned that I may not be able to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but I was concerned that I may not be able to get a job. Um, I was coming home to back home with my parents, and I put out applications, and um, Wesley and I were engaged, and we were going to get married that summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to see, and we graduated in April. We were on a co-op program, and so I thought if I could work for a couple of months or so to get some money to help with the wedding, So I did come home and I worked at R.B. Hayes, I think it was an elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first teaching experience. And I enjoyed it. I did. And then we got married and I went to Chattanooga and I got a job and I taught, I think it was the fifth grade. That was my first real teaching job after I got married. And those children were just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about a couple of years ago, when I went down for my brother in law's funeral, a young lady came up to me and said, "Is your name Miss Reid?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Do you know that you were my first black teacher ever?"
Wow.
I said, "No," and I was so impressed. She says, "I will never forget you because you were my first." I said, "Well, bless your heart. Thank you, baby." I was impressed myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you when you were teaching down there, was it like what was the diversity like with your students and faculty and all of that?
There was not a lot of diversity.
Mm-hmm.
The school that I taught, I will never forget. The principal's name was Miss Parker. She was an older white lady, and she was very prim and proper. And she always had her nails done with red polish, and her fingers were always straight. And she was talked very proper. But the staff was not diverse.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was one other minority on that staff besides me, and this was in a predominantly African American community.
Mm-hmm.
So the children were African American, but the staff was basically white staff.
Mm-hmm.
And we did what we had to do, but I noticed that there was not a lot of diversity there at all.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that I would have my kids doing, we would have debates. We would, especially in social studies and history, I had to do a couple of debates about about slavery. And the other lady, the other staff, the other fifth grade teacher didn't do that. She says, "Oh no, I can't do that." I didn't understand why you couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of our history, but I did it anyway. And it was interesting the dialogue that I got from the children. It was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. I can't remember all the details of it right now because that's been like over 30 years ago. But I remember the dialogue and the discussion that we had was really heated and interesting.
Mm-hmm. What going backwards a little bit. So, you said when you graduated you were engaged to granddaddy. How did you guys start dating and all of that?
Okay. I was a freshman. He was a junior, and he was one of the leaders on campus who were supposed to make sure that the freshmen were comfortable and if they had any questions and showing them around the campus.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how we happened to be because we both were in the choir, and I guess that's how we started communicating and talking because of our relationship in the choir.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the only boyfriend I had. That was the only boyfriend I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were in the choir together, and he was a popular person on campus. So if you knew him, you knew me. And um, we would study sometime together at the student union, but he played cards a lot. Um, yeah, so we were together my whole 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then he graduated and left me on campus. And he used to call and his father used to say, his father would say, "Tell him it's cheaper if you marry her because these telephone bills are just too much." So we did, and eventually end up getting married in July. So we've been married 56 years.
Mm-hmm. How was the wedding planning process? How did that go?
Oh, that was interesting. I have my girlfriends from let's see, Priscilla, my roommate, my cousin, Deborah,
Mhm.
and my girlfriend, Karen. Those were my bridesmaids, and my colors were peach and yellow. And we planned it. It was at the church, Greater Abyssinia, and Reverend Cavendish performed the ceremony. And we had our reception down the street at a reception hall. And then we left. We got up the next morning and went to church. Went to an AME church. That was my first experience
Mhm.
at an AME church, because his friend was the pastor there, Reverend Henney.
How different was it than the church you were
Well,
used
it
to?
was different. It was a smaller congregation, and they had a little small choir, because coming from Greater Abyssinia, you had a large choir, good gospel singing, and that wasn't what I had that morning. But I was okay with it. And then after that, we left and we went to um, Phoenix, Phoenix City, Alabama, I think, where his roommate was pastoring, and that's where we spent our honeymoon, because Wesley had to preach that Sunday.
It's so fun.
Yeah, so that was our honeymoon in Phoenix City with Jerry and King, and then we came back to Chattanooga, and I started working.
Mhm. How did Mother and Medea and everybody um, feel about you getting married?
Well, my mother said, "You don't have to do this right now." She says, just wait a while and work and get an experience. But I said, no, I didn't want to do that.
Mhm.
But after I got married, everything was fine.
Did Medea feel the same way?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. They wanted me to wait and experience some things before I got married. But as young women, we have our own voices,
Mhm.
and so I decided, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go ahead and get married. So I did.
Do you think, in retrospect, you feel good about that, or do you wish you would have been a little older?
I think I felt good about it because I had an opportunity to do a lot of traveling that I may not normally have had if I had waited
Mhm.
and gone another direction. So I felt good about my decision.
Mhm. So, if you had to give advice, well, we'll do it in two parts, so it's not so much. If you had to give advice to someone like graduating or who just graduated from college, like what would you tell them?
If you're just graduating from college, going into the workforce, make sure that you're committed, you're focused on your passion. Um, One of the things that I have observed recently is the work ethics of a lot of our younger adults. Be committed to your job. Give it the best that you can, because you will reap the rewards. And and if you are not sure of what you're doing, that's okay. Sometimes it takes some of us a little longer to make decide exactly what my passion is. That's okay. So you always have a plan B, and hopefully it will work out. But make sure that whatever you do, it makes you happy. Don't do what somebody else wants you to do because it makes them happy. But do it, follow your plan, and make your plan work for you.
And what advice would you give to young women like who are thinking about getting married or are engaged?
If you're thinking about getting married or are engaged, make sure that you know him. Make sure that you all communicate with each other. You talk about things. Try not to have any secrets, but sometimes you might have to. Make sure that you can take care of yourself if something happens to this relationship. Make sure that you're strong enough in your own person that you don't have to depend totally on anybody else. Make sure that you can take care of me.
Hmm. Is there anything that any advice you wish you would have gotten when you were younger or about to get married, or just as a young woman, some
Mm-hmm.
advice that you wish you would have had that you ended up figuring out later on?
I think the advice that I would give a young woman is that be yourself, be your person. Don't let anybody control who you are. Don't let anybody steal your power, steal your joy. Know what you want to be, know who you want to be, and be that person. Don't let anyone dominate you.
Hmm. How old were you when you kind of figured that out?
I think I must have been about 30 because I know when we got married, I was 22.
Hmm.
And when we moved to Chattanooga, people did not refer to me as Kathy Reid. Oh, that's Reverend Reed's wife. Oh, yeah,
Hmm.
that's Reverend Reed's wife. I didn't have a name. And one day it hit me. I do have a name. I am somebody besides Reverend Reed's wife. So I had to start telling people my name is Kathy. And I started making sure that I did what I needed to do to be recognized as Kathy
Hmm.
and not as Reverend Reed's wife. And I encourage all young women, make sure that you let people know who you are and not who you think you belong to.
Hmm. So, what was kind of your earlier years of marriage like? How was?
When we got married, we moved to Chattanooga and we lived with his mother. We were living with his mother when we first got there.
Hmm.
Um, and that was interesting, it was a smaller house than I was used to, and I adjusted. Um, I got up and went to work and came home, and in my mother-in-law's house we had to come through the back, and she had a chicken coop back there, and I'll never forget those chickens running around in that little chicken coop. And after that, I think we got an apartment, and then we lived in our own apartment, and then we got a dog.
Dog? You
Yeah,
had a dog?
we had a dog. I can't remember that dog's name.
What kind of dog was it?
It
Was
was
it
a cocker spaniel, I think.
a?
I
Mm-hmm.
think. And Wesley was in seminary. He was in Atlanta during the week, and I was at home working.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw each other on the weekends when he came home to the church because he had a church in Allen Temple. That was his first church. And so I worked during the week, and when he would come home on the weekends, I was chatty Cathy. I just had to tell him everything that went on during the week, all those funny things the kids used to have to say. And one day he said, "Would you please be quiet?"
Really?
I, I said, "Okay, I'll never tell you anything else." But it was interesting. And one of the things I had to learn how to share my money.
How hard was
That was
that?
hard. And it was really hard. And then I eventually got up my own account. I did. But that was hard sharing
Hmm.
the money account. I had to learn.
What was the hardest part about that for you?
The hardest part was when I would make the deposits, I knew what I had in the bank. But
Hmm.
then when he would write checks, I didn't know what he would write. And then I would write checks and then they would bounce. And I was like, what? We weren't communicating.
Mhm.
And that's why it's so important that you just communicate about everything. And so I thought, no, this I can't have this because I don't want my credit to get bad. So that's why I had mine and he had his.
What was that conversation like?
Oh, well, there was really no discussion. I decided I want mine and you have yours.
How do you take that?
Fine. No issue. No
Mhm.
issue at all.
Mhm.
And that's where we've been.
So, when it came to kids, how old were you when you decided, okay, I think I want to have kids now?
I think I was 26.
Mm-hmm.
26 or 27.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what was what was kind of the process of figuring that out and all of that? Like,
But see, I think we were still living in Chattanooga, and I had worked for about, I mean, working about 3 or 4 years, so I had established myself,
mm-hmm.
and then Wesley got transferred to Fayetteville, Tennessee, and so we were getting ready. I told him, I said, we're not getting any younger here. We need to have children so we can start a family. And he had built a new parsonage down there, so we had talked about it, and then I got a tubal pregnancy
Mm-hmm.
and then I couldn't have any children. So then um, we talked about adopting.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about adopting.
He wasn't on board.
No, he was not on board, but he got on board.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was really supportive after he got on board, but it took him a little while to get on board.
Mm-hmm.
And that process was very interesting. We went through the social worker. We went the proper route. And the lady told me, she says, infants are really hard for us to place because as soon as they're born, they're snatched up.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, yeah, we want an infant. So she says, I don't know, it may take 2 or 3 years. So I said, well, okay, whatever it takes, we'll do it. And they come out and look at your house and look at the environment and see what you do and
Yeah.
what kind of income you have and all of that. So we went through that process. So then after we finished that process, I think it was maybe about 3 weeks, the lady called and says, I think I have a baby for you. I said, really? She said, yes. I said, where? The baby was in Nashville. Yeah, Nashville. And so she said, can you come make an appointment and we can go so you can see the baby? She says, you don't have to take it if you don't want to. Just want you to look at the baby. We'll give you a little history about the baby's family.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you can make some decisions after that. So I said, oh, okay. So I told Wesley. At that time, we had a church meeting in Nashville. So I said, well, since we had that church meeting, we'll just go then while we're already there.
Yeah.
So we went to see this baby. This was the cutest little big head baby. Remind me of my cousin Larry. I said, "Oh, I want this baby." And I had prayed earlier and said, "Lord, you will send me the child that you want me to have." And so I didn't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when she called and said, "We have a child for you," we went to see him, and there was Kevin. We named him Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin got dressed, and we took him to the meeting. We went to pick him up, took him to the meeting, and everybody was so excited to see this little fat baby. Then we applied a year or two later, and so the lady said again, it's going to be hard to get an infant. I said, well, we'll wait. Again, I said, Lord, whatever you send our way, we'll take it. This lady called. She said, well, we have a little girl, and she she said she's about 4 months old. I said, okay. She says, well, you can come, and we went to see her in Shelbyville, Tennessee. So I said, well, now I'm bringing my son along. He's 2 or 1 or something. And I said, because I want him to be part of this process. She says, oh, sure, bring him along. So we met them in this new building. And so she left me and the little baby girl, and we were playing. Me and Wesley were looking at her playing, and Kevin was talking to her. And they had just put new carpeting on this floor, and Kevin peed on the floor. I said, oh, Kevin, Kevin, Kevin. So We looked at the, she was a cute little girl. So I said, this is it. I said, and Wesley named her.
Mhm.
I named Kevin and he named Tamika.
Where do you think he got that name?
I don't know where he got that name from. I don't have a clue where he got that name. But Kevin, I had a little boy in my room. His name was Kevin Ferguson. And
Mhm.
he was the cutest kid. And I just loved his name, Kevin. So I said, I'm going to name him Kevin.
Mhm.
And I don't know where Wesley got his name from for Tamika, but he did. And so now we have two children. We went through the final adoption process in Kentucky for both of them, I think.
Mhm.
And so now when we come to Cleveland, Wesley leaves, he's transferred from Fayetteville, Tennessee to Louisville, Kentucky.
Mhm.
We have two children and they're little old toddlers now. And we go into this church parsonage and in one of the rooms, the paint and everything was chipping and falling all on the floor. And I made sure that the kids didn't go in there because I don't want to get them have that lead paint.
Mhm.
So I called myself protecting them and closing the door. But when we got to Cleveland, about a year later, I was registering them, getting them ready to go to preschool. So they had to have a physical. So I took them to the clinic, and the clinician said, "Well, she has a little talking about Tamika. She has a little lead poisoning. Lead poisoning? Where did she get that from? She had been eating some of them chips.
Oh
I
my
did not know
gosh.
that from that old house. I said, Lord,
Eating them.
Lord, my baby, my baby. But she was okay. She was fine. She wasn't enough to hurt her. But I thought, where did we get lead poisoning from? But that's where it was from.
Mhm.
And so we came to Cleveland and we've been happy ever after.
Mhm. What were some of your fears or maybe some things you were excited about being a mom?
I was so excited to be a mom. I couldn't wait for Mother's Day because everybody, all the mothers stand up,
Mhm.
and I'll never forget. I think we were in Fayetteville, and they asked for all the mothers. I was the first one to pop up because I was glad to be a mother. I was so excited, and I enjoyed it. I read to my children. I the West when I worked during the day, Wesley stayed with them during the day, so he was babysitting,
Mhm.
and then we decided to send Kevin to a daycare up the street because I told Wesley he needs to have some interaction with younger babies, kids his
Mhm.
age, instead of just you. So we sent him up to the daycare for a couple of days. Well, he didn't like that at all. He didn't like that at all because he was the only little black baby, brown baby up there.
Mhm.
So after a while, he got adjusted and he was okay. But he needed the socialization.
Mhm.
And then Tamika came, and that was enough socialization for him.
More than enough.
more, more than enough. More than enough. Yeah. But I always wanted to make sure that my children knew that they were adopted children,
Mhm.
that they were the chosen ones. We chose them
How important was that for you to?
because I didn't want anybody else, I did not want to keep it a secret and then 10 or 15 years up the road, somebody else to come up and say, yeah, you're adopted. And they
Mhm.
did not know. I wanted to make sure that we were very transparent with our children, and I wanted them to make sure that they knew that they were wanted and they were loved and that we needed them.
Mhm.
And so I used to buy books on why I was adopted and read it to them so that they could understand the process
Mhm.
and that they would never feel insecure about it at all.
So how old were they when you started making sure that you were telling them about that?
4 and 5, before they started school, we started talking about it then.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was important to me that they knew. I didn't care about anybody else, but I wanted them to know that we loved them and they were chosen for us.
Mhm.
And I used to tell them, I asked God, send me some kids, and He sent me you, because I didn't see anybody else after that, and I had the option. I could have seen some other children, but I didn't want to see any other children. After I saw them, I knew that's what God wanted me to have.
Mhm. Do you remember anything about like information about like where their biological parents
Um,
or like where they were born and that sort of stuff?
no, I don't remember where they were born, but Kevin, both of them are biracial parents.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin's mother was an African American. His father was white.
Mm-hmm.
Tamika's mother was white. Her father was black. And Kevin's parent, no, it was Tamika's parents had sickle cell traits in that family. So
Mm-hmm.
I was always concerned about checking for Tamika for the sickle cell, but she was always okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then her children, Josh and Riley, are okay. They didn't have any of the traits. Um, and I'm thinking there was diabetes on Kevin's side of the family, but
Mm-hmm.
those were the only medical concerns that they shared with me that I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to stay on top of that sickle cell.
Yeah. You don't want that to
No,
surprise you
right,
at all.
right.
What were some of like going to their temperaments like growing up? What kind of kids were both of them?
They were good kids. They were very good kids. Very affectionate. They were. Tamika was always dominant. Um, Kevin was always quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he enjoyed his friends. He liked sports. He was always on a team that lost. He was in the Boy Scouts. He played his Boy Scout team had a baseball team and they never won anything. He was in the basketball team at Lutheran East and they very seldom won games. He was on a football team and but that's okay. He enjoyed the sport. He enjoyed his friends, and I enjoyed it with him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Tamika, on the other hand, she didn't want to play too much basketball because she didn't want to get hurt. I think she played 1 year basketball, and I think she hurt her ankle and she didn't play anymore. Um, Tamika was very opinionated in her classes. She very much so, very opinionated. Um, she used to she used to protect Kevin sometimes because some of these girls would be so mean. And Wesley had told him that you never hit women.
Mm-hmm.
And even though some of them may have wanted to push him to that point, Tamika, he wouldn't do it. And Tamika would take up for him.
She would get into fights.
Oh, yeah, Tamika would take up for him. She says, "You're going to talk to my brother like that." I remember there was one little girl when we lived on 125th. She did something to Kevin, and he didn't retaliate, but Tamika did.
What
And
would
she beat
happen?
that little girl up.
Oh.
So Tamika, you can't do that. Well, she bets with my brother. I said, okay. But yeah, Tamika was yeah, she did. Like I said, Kevin was quiet. She was always the assertive one and the aggressive one and the combative one.
Mm-hmm.
But Kevin was the quiet one. Yeah. But they were good kids to each other. They cared about. They were typical brother and sister. They argued all the time, but they really loved each other.
Mm-hmm. Who was the better one in school, like grades wise?
I would think it would maybe Tamika. Yeah. When Tamika put her mind to it, she was very bright. That's when she. But see, she was so busy arguing with the classroom teacher, she didn't have time to study on a
Mm-hmm.
lot of classes because her opinion was different from their opinion, and that caused her some concern. I said, "Okay, girl." I used to tell her, "Tamika, you are uh, bougie," and she
Really?
would say, "No, I'm not." I said, "Yes, you are. Yes, you're snobbish." "No, I'm not."
What were some things that you and mom like clashed about when she was growing up?
We really didn't clash too much. If she I remember one time I put her on punishment for something, and I took all of her phones away. Oh, you would have thought I killed her. I, I, I took all the cell phones. At least I thought I had taken all the little cell phones away from her, and I would take the cordless phones with me when I'd go out.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking she doesn't have any access to any phone conversations. One day I came home and I found this little phone in the drawer. I said, "Oh, girlfriend got her phone in the drawer." So I took the little phone, and when she realized her phone was gone, she was furious. Well, I told you no phone calls. So now, since you've been talking on the phone, I'm going to extend the punishment. She
Mhm.
was
How
furious.
old was she
She
when
must have been about 12, 11 to 12,
Mhm.
at that age that she thinks she's grown.
Mm.
Yes. So I think I basically we never had a lot of run-ins. I know a couple of times I took her to some YPD church youth meetings. She
Mhm.
didn't really want to go. She had a little attitude. We had to talk about that attitude, but she
Mhm.
wasn't bad.
What about Uncle Kevin? Was there
No.
anything that was like his thing? Like mom, you said it was her attitude and that sort of stuff. Did he have like a
Kevin, he was just an all-around nice guy. He wouldn't start anything, but he wouldn't let you take advantage of him.
Mhm.
Um, he was Tamika used to say he was my favorite, but I didn't have a favorite. They were both my favorite. But he was quiet, and he kind of reminds me of Josh a little bit.
Mhm.
He was his friends loved him, um, and he drove a car. I remember Wesley got him this orange gremlin. He was told you can't drive it if we're not in town.
Mhm.
Well, we had gone out of town to a church meeting or something, and what does he do?
Of course.
Kevin and Rafiq get in the car. They get to drive it, and they have an accident in the orange gremlin. But we get home, Wesley was furious because I thought I told you don't drive. Well, we just went to the store. It was interesting. Kevin would, yeah, he was a good kid.
Mhm. What are some of your favorite memories with each kid?
Well, when they were younger, we would go to the amusement park. They loved to ride the roller coaster, especially Tamika. She loved the roller. Come on, mom, let's go. No, I'm not going on the roller coaster. Um, we'd go into the fun house. They liked that. Um, I would take them swimming. And remember, I don't swim, but I love to see them swim. They'd have so much fun at the pool. Um, we would go to plays together. I took them to see the Alvin Ailey dancers.
Mhm.
I was more excited than they were. They didn't care, but at least they heard of who the Alvin Ailey dancers are and had an opportunity to see them.
Mhm.
I would take Tamika and her girlfriends. They would have this community day at let me see, the Cleveland Theater, I think on Carnegie, or it's a Euclid. I think it's Euclid. And I would take Tamika and some of her friends, maybe once or twice a month, to the plays, trying to expose them to other things. I took Kevin. What play did we? I think we went to see The Sound of Music when it was at the Playhouse Square. So I tried to have some experiences with him. They were outside of school,
Mhm.
and they enjoyed them. At first they didn't, but when they got older, they really appreciated it.
Yeah. So, to someone, another like kind of advice question. So the first one is, what advice would you give to someone who just found out that they cannot have kids naturally? What would you say to them?
I would say there are options. Research your options and see which is best for you.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the like things that you learned about yourself with that? Like once you found that out and kind of went through the feelings of finding that out and
Once I found out that I couldn't have children, I was just really like,
mm-hmm.
depressed. And I think I was sinking into a deep hole. And then something said, why? There are other ways, there are other options.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had not thought about other options. I had just thought about having a baby and being pregnant. That's the only way you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then after I started thinking about it, I changed my attitude. I said, okay, then if I can't have it this way, I can have it another way.
Mm-hmm. And so, to parents who are at that place where they've said, okay, we can't do it naturally, but we have other options, and they're considering adoption, what would you tell to them?
I would tell them to go through the proper channels, because if you go through some processes that are not legal, you could get your heart broken.
Mm-hmm.
But go through the proper channels like we did. Do the paperwork, and there's a whole lot of that. Answer all the questions, and then be ready, because it will happen.
Mm-hmm. How would you? What advice would you give them about the children that they're meeting and that they're potentially like going to adopt? Like, what would you tell them about raising those adopted children and being a parent in that way?
Raise them, letting them know that they were special, that you chose them. They were special. Um, I tried never to give. Kevin and Tamika always knew that they were loved. I tell them that all the time, and we talk about issues, and we communicate with each other,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was challenging some days. But we communicated, and then there are times when the incident happens, I may not be ready to communicate with you because I may be very angry at you, but we're going to talk later.
Mm-hmm.
You communicate with them, you talk to them, you get their feelings, and then they can let them help them to understand your feelings. But I would say always let them know that they were chosen and they're special.
Mm-hmm. So, um, how old were you when you first became a grandparent?
When I first became I think I was 40. I think it was about 40. I was excited then too. I did everything but carry the baby with Tamika. And the day she went to the hospital, I was right there, and the baby was born, and they said you can go and see her in the nursery. And I went over there, and all these other little babies were crying. And I looked in the back of the nursery. That's yours right back there. Riley was not crying. She was looking around like, where in the devil am I? I don't remember this place. She was just very curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I was excited. And then when we had Grandparents' Day, which is the second Sunday in September, I was the first one to pop up that day too, because
Mm-hmm.
I was glad to be a grandparent.
What were you the most excited about when you found out you were going to be a grandparent?
That I was going to be a grandparent, I was just excited. I thought that after being a parent, the next best thing is being a grandparent. Keep the legacy going.
Mm-hmm. So, when you finally were one, what were some expectations that you had that were met? And then what were some things once you became a grandparent that you were like, oh, I wasn't expecting this?
Well, the expectations that I had would be that um, I would be a grandparent that they would be very proud of.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to live a life in front of them that is Christian, that has high morals. Um, One of the things that I think that I wasn't expecting, when they're little, they're just all over you and they just here talking and just wonderful. But when they get older, they kind of go their little way, and the old grandma's over here. I'll go visit her in a little while. That I wasn't expecting, but I understand. They have a life of their own, and they're growing. And so I've accepted that they're not going to hang around me all day anymore.
Mhm. How how was it when it came to like when mom was first when we were small and she was learning how to be a parent? How was how did that kind of affect your relationship with mom as she was learning how to be a mom essentially?
It was exciting to see her be a mom. I saw her growing. I saw her teaching them like I taught her. Um, she was she was in it 110%. I was impressed at the mother that she was to her babies.
Mm-hmm.
I was impressed. I said, "You did good, girl. You did good."
Mm-hmm. So, um, when mom and my dad got were getting married, going backwards a little bit,
Hmm.
when they were getting married, how was that for you when she kind of told you that was going on and all of that? How did you
I
feel?
thought, oh Lord, you're getting married, but you haven't finished college and you haven't got a job, and you know how the mothers do.
Mm-hmm.
Like most mothers, I was not very ready for her to get married. But did she listen to me? No. And she got married, and I got two beautiful grandchildren out of it.
Mm-hmm. So when they were going through the divorce, um, what was that like for you, like as a mom having to kind of see mom go through that?
It was challenging for me as the mom to see my daughter go through that pain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I tried to be here for her, be her sounding board. One of the things I kept encouraging her to, whatever you do, make sure that you take care of you and you take care of your children.
Mm-hmm. Was it were there like some things that you felt like, oh, I probably should like not comment on or like kind of stay
Hmm.
out? Like, how was it for you to find the boundaries with that?
My comments were always very general. I tried to be the kind of mother-in-law that was not in your business.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to stay out of it, even though sometimes she tried to bring me in it.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to stay out of it and be very generic in some of my responses. Um, because my main concern was I just wanted to make sure that her mental health and her mental strength and physical strength were okay.
Mm-hmm. So later on, when Micah came around, um, did you have any kind of hesitations or
Well,
things
I
like
didn't know
that?
him either.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh, Tamika, nobody know. I don't know. I didn't know him." But she says, "I know him. I've known him all these years." And da, da, da. I said, "Okay."
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking. I said, "Okay. Hopefully, you know what's best for you." And if that's what she wanted, I supported it.
Was it kind of scary given like the past
Mm-hmm.
situation for you?
Yes. And my main concern was Josh and Riley. Josh and Riley were young. They were babies almost. And they didn't really, I don't think they really understood the divorce process and what that entailed and the remarrying of their mother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how are they dealing with this emotionally? And Josh is one that didn't talk a lot, but I could tell that he was angry. He was hurting. He didn't really understand what was going on. All he knew was this other man was taking his mom away from his dad,
Mm-hmm.
and he was not dealing with that well at all. And I tried to explain that to Tamika, but she was in love. She didn't really see what
Yeah.
I saw. Riley, I wasn't so sure about. I'm thinking she was accepting it a little better than Josh. I thought she was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But that was my concern was for the children at this time,
Mhm.
how they were handling the divorce, and it was not good. And then the beginning of the marriage, I felt it was not good. Josh was still angry, and he was not accepting. But as time went on, he had more experiences with Micah, more opportunities to be around Micah. He began to soften up. He began to accept him, but it took some time.
Mhm.
And I saw the change. I began to see the slight change in it. So yeah, that was my concern.
How did how do you think your experience with having gone through a similar like situation like with your parents splitting up and then mother getting remarried, how do you think that helped your perspective for like me and Josh going through that? Do you think it gave you a little bit more like
Yeah, it did. I didn't have the kind of anger that I saw in Josh and you. I didn't have that kind of anger because my dad, I was old enough. I think I was a teenager or
mhm
preteen or something. My dad had some issues too, and I knew those issues. But you all were too young to understand what was going on. And so I just felt that somebody needed to be around, that if you needed to talk about it, somebody, because I didn't have anybody around that I could talk to.
mhm
So I wanted to make sure that if you needed somebody to talk to, I was here. I know I had a little teddy bear upstairs, and I still have that little teddy bear to remind me. And tell Josh sometimes to remind you of where you were when your mom and dad divorced. He would be so angry. I say, here, Josh, take this teddy bear and just tell me how you feel. And he would beat that little teddy bear up. He knocked his eyes and everything
he
out.
sure did
But I still have that teddy bear. That's how much anger he had. But I was here to let him know that you can do that. It's okay
mhm
to vent. It's okay to vent that way. But see, I didn't have anybody to do that for me.
so you understood because you didn't have anybody
Right.
like how important it would have been to make sure
Yes.
that was
Mm-hmm.
the person was there. So what are some of your favorite memories with your grandchildren?
My favorite memories with my grandchildren are our Christmases were always fun.
Mhm.
They'd come over to the house and we'd have toys all in front of the fireplace, on the chair, all on the couch, all on the floor, and everybody would have a section. And they'd go to their section. We'd open up all our little Christmas toys, and we'd just be laughing, ooh, having a good time. I look forward to that, and especially for the times when they would give me specific things that they wanted,
Mhm.
and I would get them. We would get those specific things, and they really would like those. I enjoyed when we went down to. I took them to Florida. We went to Disney World. We had the best time. Um, that was fun. Let's see. We go to Cracker Barrel. That's our favorite spot to eat. Sometimes Riley and I would go to Red Robin. She
Mhm.
likes to go to Red Robin. We go out there. I'd take Josh. One time it would be Josh and Grandma. And another time I'd take Riley out. It would be Riley and Grandma. So those are the kinds of things that we used to do.
Mhm. So, what are you excited for like now that me and Josh are older? What are some things you're excited for like now?
Well, for Josh, I am excited about where he is emotionally, how he has grown, how he's learning to deal with his feelings. And he is so passionate about his music. He does an outstanding job with his music. He's composing music. He plays with a band, and he is so excited. When D'Amica sends me the videos, he's really all into it. He's excited about what he does, and I'm excited for him. And for Riley, She has made me so proud of her. I, when she was growing up, I thought she just was going to be a little dingbat princess because she's just as pretty as she can be. I said, "Oh Lord, she's just going to be one of these blondies." But she shocks me. She is so intelligent. She is so gifted. And I am so proud of where she is. She is focused. She has made some great career decisions, and the door is open to her. She can go anywhere and do anything she wants in this career, and I hope she will continue to move forward.
So, what what's some advice would you give to someone who has married children? Like their kids are older and they've gotten married and kind of starting their own families.
Like Tamika?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I always say family is important. And no matter how old your children are, they're always going to be your children. Now, my baby is almost 50 years old, but she's still my baby. And I'm always there for her. And as your children grow older and have their children, just let them know that I'm here. We're not going to always agree on what you do or how you do things, but I'm here.
Mhm. And what would you give? What advice would you give to someone who is a new parent, a new grandparent, or about to be a grandparent?
Girl, just love them babies. Just love them grandbabies because then you can send them back home to their mommies.
And lastly, um, what would you want like your great grandchildren and so forth to know about you?
I'd want my great grandchildren to know that I am a woman of morals, of principles, and expectations. I'm a Christian in my heart, and I try to treat everybody right, and sometimes that's not easy. But I would like for them to live a life that's pleasing to Christ.
Okay, that's the last question.